Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world where no human name has yet been spoken. A place where the air is warm with the breath of plants you'll never see alive again. And the wind moves in long, unbroken sighs across fern plains. Somewhere in the distance, a shape stirs so large that the ground beneath you seems to hum. You can almost feel it before you see it. A deep, patient weight moving beneath the sun. And the question comes to you quietly, like a ripple across still water. How did the biggest dinosaurs come to be? You probably wouldn't last a day here. Not because you'd be hunted, but because this land belongs to bodies that could step over you without even noticing. The air is thick with green scents, with heat rising off the damp earth, with the soft drone of insects that once had wingspans wider than your outstretched arms. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you do, tell me in the comments where you are and what time it is there as you listen. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of an ancient river, its surface gold with the first light of morning. Behind you, the land rolls into a low valley, dotted with cycads and tree ferns, their fronds trembling in the breeze. Ahead, the river cuts through a plain that feels endless, its far edge hidden behind the shimmer of heat. Here, in this suspended moment between the Triassic and the Jurassic, the Earth is still deciding what life will become. The climate is changing slowly, but enough to tilt the balance toward new forms of giants. The continents are still close, the ocean's shallow, and rainfall is beginning to stitch green corridors through what once was desert. From the ground, you notice impressions, broad, shallow basins pressed into the dry mud. Each one is the size of a kitchen sink. A single footstep left behind by something vast. The edges of the print are already crumbling into sand, but for now they hold tiny pools of last night's rain. Researchers still question whether these tracks belong to early sauropods or some now forgotten lineage. Either way, you are looking at the beginning of a story that will span over 100 million years. The first giants were not yet the largest. They were slender by comparison to the behemoths that would come later, creatures like Prehistoric with long necks and tails, bodies balanced over strong hind legs, feeding high into the canopy. Their bones, when found, speak of creatures adapting rapidly, vertebrae lengthening lungs, growing more efficient, legs reorienting beneath the body for better support. You picture them moving slowly across this plain shadow, and light sliding over the curve of their flanks. The air smells of wet clay resin and the faint metallic tang of mineral-rich water. In the far distance, clouds are gathering over the hills, a promise of storms that will keep these floodplains lush. And you realize, as you follow the trail of footprints toward the horizon, that the earth was already making room for greatness. The ground itself was being shaped to bear their weight, deep-rooted plants to hold the soil river valleys broad enough to feed them, and skies wide enough to frame their silhouettes. Here beneath ancient skies, the question still hangs. Not just how they became the biggest, but why the world once needed them so vast. You follow the river's curve until the land opens wider and the horizon begins to feel impossibly far away. The air carries a softer warmth here, tinged with the scent of flowering plants that do not yet exist in your own time, but bloom freely in this one. We stand at the threshold of the Jurassic, and the earth is tilting toward abundance. Rain has begun to fall more often in these latitudes, washing over soils that were once cracked and red with drought. The rivers swell their banks, crowding with horsetails as tall as a man, and ginkgo trees fanning their delicate leaves in the wind. The lushness feels new, as though the world itself is stretching after a long sleep. This is not an age of single landscapes, but of vast, unbroken corridors of green. Across them, creatures can roam without ever leaving the reach of food or water. And it is in this cradle of plenty that the lineage of the biggest dinosaurs will take root and rise. The early sauropods you saw in the last valley were only the first drafts. Here, evolution is revising the blueprint. Necks grow longer, vertebrae lighter, yet stronger, an intricate architecture of bone and hair. Legs thicken, placing the body's pillars squarely beneath the rib cage to carry even greater weight. Lungs far more efficient than any mammals breathe, great slow volumes of air cooling the blood and feeding the muscles with oxygen. Researchers still question whether it was the sheer abundance of vegetation or the absence of serious predators that allowed these giants to grow so large, so fast. Perhaps it was both, or perhaps some third quieter force, the long, patient hand of climate, guided them upward in size until the ground itself trembled in their passing. In the shadowed forest edge, you catch a glimpse of movement, the long, slate-gray neck arcing upward into the canopy, its tip crowned with a small head. Teeth shaped like spoons, stripped leaves from the highest branches, a feeding height no rival can match. Below the forest floor is littered with fallen fronds trampled into mulch that will feed the soil. At a nearby stream, smaller animals drink tiny bipeds that scatter at the sound of a heavy step. They vanish into the undergrowth, leaving behind only the ripples in the water. Above them, the giant remains still, the slow rhythm of its chewing in perfect time with the river's current. Here you begin to understand. The world did not just allow giants, it built itself around them. The forest grew taller because there were mouths that could reach the top. The rivers meandered wider because bodies like these needed space to cross. The land became more than ground. It became a stage for creatures that could only exist in this narrow chapter of deep time. And as the sun dips lower, the giant moves on its shadow, stretching far across the floodplain. Somewhere in that lengthening darkness lies the future one that will see its descendants grow larger still, until the scale becomes almost unimaginable. The morning after a night of soft rain, you walk out onto a broad, glistening plain. The air smells of damp earth and crushed horsetail stalks, sweetened faintly by the pollen of cicadas. Low mist clings to the ground, curling around your ankles, as though reluctant to let you pass. Before you, the earth is patterned with impressions. Each one a single step from a creature you will never meet, yet feel as if you already know. Some prints are shallow, a hand's breadth deep, filled with a thin mirror of rainwater. Others sink so far that the edges slump inward, collapsing under their own weight. Here on these Jurassic floodplains, the ground itself remembers. Each track is a page in a diary written in mud and time. You can follow them in any direction, and each path tells a different story. Some meandering lazily toward distant shade, others cutting direct lines to the river's edge. The first sauropods to leave such impressions were not yet the titans we imagine. They were immense compared to any creature alive today, yet still smaller than the giants to come. Species like Volcanodon and Dinosaurs walked here, carrying their weight on columnar legs, moving with a slow but unshakable rhythm. Researchers still question whether these early floodplains were seasonal lush for part of the year and dry for the rest, or if they maintained their green through every season. If the climate shifted, it would have demanded that the giants move in great slow migrations, following the river corridors like lifelines. You kneel beside one of the deeper prints and run your hand along the hardened rim. In places, you see where the weight of the foot pushed small stones into the clay. A dragonfly ancient yet almost identical to the ones in your own time darts low over the water pooled in the depression. For a moment the surface stills and you can see the sky reflected there, just as the dinosaur might have seen it when the step was first taken. The trail you follow leads toward the river, where the soft ground turns to packed sediment. Here the prints fade into a jumble of ripple marks and the gentle channels carved by retreating water. Perhaps the dinosaur stopped to drink or to feed on the greenery that grows thicker along the banks. Perhaps it simply passed through, never knowing it would leave behind the only record of its passing. These floodplains are the first great stage for sauropods, a place where their sheer size begins to shape the landscape. Every step compacts the soil, every tree felled in feeding clears, light for new growth. In this way, they are not just inhabitants, they are architects of their own world. And as you lift your eyes to the horizon, you catch a glimpse of something taller than the tree line, moving with the calm confidence of a creature that knows it has no equal. It will bring you deeper into the heart of the Jurassic, a place where the giants have fully arrived. The land ahead rises gently, lifting you above the river's whisper and into the cool green shade of a forest, older than any human dream. Sunlight falls here in tall columns, spilling over moss and tangled roots. The air is heavier, touched with the resin scent of conifers and the faint peppery sweetness of cycads in bloom. Somewhere ahead, a branch cracks deep and slow. Not the frantic snap of a smaller creature fleeing, but the deliberate sound of weight and reach. You move quietly, though. In truth, there is no need. Whatever walks here is too vast to be startled by you. Through the trees, a shape resolves, a neck rising and falling like the mast of a drifting ship. A torso high as a house supported by 4 legs, taller than your entire body. This is Brachiosaurus, one of the first dinosaurs to truly live in the sky of leaves. It feeds at a height where no other herbivore can compete, stripping the tender new growth from the uppermost branches. Its spoon-shaped teeth shear the foliage clean, dropping the occasional fragment to the forest floor, where smaller animals wait to scavenge what it leaves behind. Above, the canopy shifts in size under its touch, each movement releasing a small rain of pollen. Researchers still question whether Brachiosaurus fed in small family groups or wandered alone its size enough to protect it from most threats. What is certain is the effect it had on its world. By grazing the tallest branches, it forced trees to grow higher, to reach for light beyond the sweep of its neck. Over time, the forest itself adapted to the giants, just as the giants adapted to the forest. Its forelegs, longer than its hind legs, tilt its back in a gentle slope toward the tail. This posture, rare among sauropods, angles its head upward, naturally perfect for a life spent in the high canopy. Each breath it draws moves like wind through a cavern, filling vast lungs with warm, damp air. The rhythm of its breathing is so slow, so deep, you can feel it through the ground. At one point, it shifts its weight, and you hear the muffled groan of the soil beneath its feet. Where it steps, ferns are crushed flat, leaving prints that will hold rainwater and become tiny ecosystems in their own right. You follow it for a time, your view shifting between the forest's shadow and the sunlit crown where its head sways. It seems less like an animal and more like a moving piece of the earth, an extension of the land draped in living muscle. When it finally moves away, it does so without hurry, vanishing into the deeper forest with the ease of something that has all the time in the world. The silence it leaves behind feels heavier than before, as though the air itself is remembering the presence that just passed. Beyond these trees lies the southern half of the world's vast, open floodplains, where an even greater giant will claim its place in history. The forest thins until the trees stand far apart, their shadows stretched across open grasslands. The air is drier here, carrying the dust of distant plateaus and the faint mineral tang of inland lakes. Above, the sky is so wide it feels almost too large for the eye to hold a dome of pale blue under which anything seems possible. And then on the horizon, a shape begins to take form. At first, it is only a ripple in the light, a slow-moving swell against the line of the earth. But as it draws nearer, the scale resolves, and the ground beneath your feet begins to speak in a low, steady rhythm. This is Argentinosaurus, the largest land animal science has yet uncovered. Over 30 meters from head to tail, weighing as much as a dozen elephants. It moves with a calm that borders on surreal. Every step presses the soil into history, Every sway of its neck shifts the air in soft currents you can feel from the distance. Its skin is a vast landscape of its own pebbled weathered, patterned in muted tones of gray and ochre that break its outline against the plains. The neck arches in a slow, deliberate sweep, reaching into the crowns of trees whose roots have drunk from these same rivers for centuries. The sound of leaves tearing away is followed by the quiet rain of fragments drifting down to the ground. Researchers still question exactly how Argentinosaurus lived in such open country. Was it a solitary wanderer moving between seasonal feeding grounds? Or did it travel in loose herds, its sheer presence shaping the path of entire ecosystems? Fossil evidence hints at both possibilities. Partial trackways in hardened mud suggesting groups, but the vast distances between known remains suggesting solitary journeys. A warm wind rises from the south, carrying with it the scent of water. Perhaps a shallow lake where this giant will drink later in the day. Its tail swings gently behind it, a counterbalance to the immense weight ahead. Each movement smooth as the current of a slow river. As you walk parallel to its course, you notice the scale of the landscape itself. Trees here are tall, but spaced far apart, perhaps shaped by centuries of giants passing through clearing paths with their bulk. Grasses ripple in patterns that mirror the giant's pace, as if the entire plain is breathing in time with it. Eventually, the Argentinosaurus slows, stopping beside a stand of conifers. It lowers its head, the motion almost imperceptible until the ground vibrates slightly under your feet. For a moment, the world holds still, sky, earth, and giant aligned in a single unhurried breath. In this place, under these southern skies, scale itself feels rewritten. You are no longer measuring size by human standards, but by the length of a neck against the horizon, by the time it takes for a single step to fall. Beyond the heat-hazed edge of the plain, another movement stirs a herd, perhaps drifting like a distant mirage. And somewhere among them, another giant waits ready to tell its own story. The air cools slightly as you descend toward a broad valley where the wind moves in long, even strokes across an endless sweep of green. From here, the land appears to flow, the grass bending like water beneath an invisible tide. It takes a moment before you realize that the tide has a source movement far in the distance, rolling slowly toward you. At first, it's only a shift in the pattern of the grass. Then shapes emerge, tall, deliberate, swaying in unison. Dozens of them stretching from one end of the valley to the other, their necks rising and falling like waves. You are watching a herd of Patagotitan among the largest dinosaurs ever to live their combined presence, transforming the plain into a living ocean. Each one is a continent of muscle and bone, moving with the calm certainty of creatures that have walked this path for generations. Their steps fall into a rhythm that you can feel as much as hear a slow, deep percussion that settles somewhere behind your ribs. They feed as they move, sweeping their necks in arcs to strip the seed heads from tall cycads and ancient grasses. Small birds, early relatives of those that will one day sing in your own time, flit between their legs, catching insects stirred up by the giant's passing. Researchers still question how such immense animals coordinated in groups without exhausting the land beneath them. Perhaps the river winding silver through the center of the valley was the key, offering water enough for all its banks, lined with new growth that replenished with each season. The fossilized floodplain deposits found here suggest that these valleys were both a pantry and a highway, guiding the herds from one feeding ground to the next. From your place at the edge of their path, you can hear the subtle language of the herd, low resonant calls that travel farther through the ground than through the air. It is not sound you hear, so much as feel a vibration in your bones that speaks of distance, direction, and the quiet reassurance of company. The leader passes within 50 paces of you, its shadow brushing over the grass where you stand. Its skin bears the faint marks of age scars, where old scales have healed over pale lines, where branches have scraped against it. And yet, it moves with a grace that feels almost impossible for something so large. As the herd drifts on, the grass rises slowly behind them, springing back from the press of their feet. The river ahead gleams brighter in the late light, promising rest and water before the herd's journey continues. You follow at a distance, watching as the great shapes dissolve once more into the horizon. The valley grows quiet again, though the earth still hums with the memory of their passing. And somewhere beyond these grasslands, another giant waits, a solitary figure whose bones will one day tell paleontologists that size alone can be a kind of defiance. The valley narrows into a corridor of low hills, their flanks scattered with conifers leaning into the wind. The air is drier here, sharper, carrying the faint scent of volcanic stone. A thin trail of dust hangs above the horizon, moving too steadily to be wind alone. When it appears, it is alone. A single towering silhouette, broad-shouldered neck, lifting in a long, deliberate arc against the pale sky. This is Dreadnoughtus, a name that means fear nothing. And standing here watching it advance, you understand why. It is one of the heaviest creatures ever to walk the earth, over 65 tons by some estimates. Its size is not a show of excess, but of survival. In this open country where predators roam in the shadows of ravines, being vast is its own kind of shield. You watch it navigate a slope of loose stone, each step deliberate, the ground shifting under its weight, but never unseating it. The muscles along its shoulders and hips roll beneath the skin like the movement of buried rivers. Its tail, thick as a tree trunk at the base, swings gently behind a counterbalance and a weapon both. Researchers still question the range of such a giant. Some argue Dreadnoughtus could have roamed far, sustained by the open plains and seasonal river growth. Others suggest it stayed within a well-known territory, feeding in a slow circuit that gave the land time to recover between visits. The bones that survive, nearly complete for a dinosaur of its size, tell us it lived in a landscape shaped by periodic floods, where fertile ground rose and fell with the water. Its neck lowers to strip an entire branch from a young conifer. The sound is deep and muffled, more like tearing fabric than breaking wood. Shreds of bark fall away as it chews its jaws, moving in the slow patience of something that has never needed to rush. Alone, it moves without the quiet calls and vibrations of herd life. Yet the land seems to respond to it just the same. Birds wheel in the air above its back, catching insects stirred from the grass. A shadow of a predator slips along a ridge far away, only to pause, reconsider, and vanish back into the rocks. It passes within 100 paces of you, the air warming briefly, in the space between its body and yours. You can hear the faint hiss of its breathing, feel the low thud of its heart, and the tremor under your feet. And then it is gone, swallowed by the folds of the hills, leaving only the dust and the wind to mark its trail. Ahead lies a different kind of giant, not the heaviest or tallest, but the one whose form stretches the imagination further than any other. The land changes again, softening into a broad basin, ringed by mountains whose peaks are still dusted with the cool of higher air. Mist gathers here in the mornings, pooling like a quiet sea before the sun burns it away. The soil is dark and rich, feeding stands of conifers, cycads, and ginkgo that reach skyward in calm competition for light. And into this stillness, a shadow arrives, longer, more improbable than any you've seen before. It begins at the ground, rises in a slow curve, and just keeps rising. This is Mamenchisaurus, whose neck could stretch over 15 meters, nearly half the length of its entire body. It moves with an elegance that feels at odds with its size, the neck swaying like a bridge hung in the air, counterbalanced perfectly by the sweep of its tail. From a distance, it seems almost a trick of the light, your eyes searching for, where the neck ends and the sky begins. Researchers still question the exact purpose of such extraordinary length. Some suggest it allowed the animal to feed over a wide area without moving its massive body, conserving energy in a world where even giants must eat constantly. Others imagine complex displays neck movements as signals to rivals or mates, turning anatomy into language. The ground here is dotted with patches of fern and clusters of horsetails as tall as your shoulder. Mamenchisaurus moves among them with slow, sweeping motions, lowering its head to graze before lifting it effortlessly into the upper canopy to strip branches no other herbivore could reach. Its jaw works in a steady rhythm, the sound muffled under the call of distant pterosaurs circling above. From your vantage, you can see how its body remains almost still, while its neck explores the forest around it, an anchored vessel sending out a living probe to harvest the green world in every direction. At times, the neck arcs over your head entirely, the shadow sliding across the ground like the passing of a cloud. The air smells faintly of resin and fresh-cut leaves where the giant is fed. A rain of tiny twigs and leaf fragments drifts down, landing softly on the moss at your feet. Somewhere behind you, small bird-like dinosaurs dart in to collect the scraps, vanishing just as quickly when the giant shifts its weight. When the Mamenchisaurus finally moves on, it does so without turning its neck, curling back toward its body like a drawn bow, before swinging forward again, leading it deeper into the basin. Each step leaves a shallow pool in the soft ground, a reminder that even the lightest-footed giant leaves its mark. Beyond the basin, the air grows cooler, the land rougher, perfect for another long-limbed wanderer whose silhouette will stretch not in height, but in length of journey. The ground firms beneath your feet as the basin gives way to rising stone. Ahead, the land tilts toward the sky, its slopes lined with weathered pines and low shrubs that cling to cracks in the rock. The air here tastes different, cooler, cleaner, with a faint metallic edge carried down from the peaks. You hear it before you see it. A slow, deliberate rhythm of movement, the soft grind of stone under massive weight. And then it appears stepping between two ridgelines, as if emerging from the memory of the mountain itself. Supersaurus, one of the longest dinosaurs to ever live, stretching nearly 40 meters from head to tail. Its frame is lean compared to the heavy-bodied titans of the plains, built for distance as much as for height. The neck reaches forward like a drawn spear, swaying gently in the wind that slips down from the snow line. Researchers still question how creatures of such length navigated uneven rocky ground. Some believe they traveled seasonal routes along mountain valleys, using the open spaces and cooler climate to avoid overheating in the warmer lowlands. Others suggest they passed through only briefly, feeding on the tall conifers before returning to the fertile basins below. From your place on the slope, you can see the wind pressing against its hide, the skin rippling faintly over the muscles beneath. It moves with care, each step tested before the weight settles, tail sweeping low to steady its balance. A cluster of smaller ornithopods darts from a thicket at its approach, vanishing into the rocks. The Supersaurus pays them no mind, its head already lifting to nip the new growth from the highest branches. The sound is quiet, just the faint pop of needles tearing free, carried away by the wind. Below the valley spreads wide, a ribbon of green between ridges. From this height, the great dinosaur's path is visible gaps in the tree line, where its neck has swept lines, in the grass, where its tail has passed. It is not just moving through the landscape, it is shaping it, leaving a quiet architecture of absence and regrowth. The wind grows stronger, tossing the treetops and sending thin clouds racing across the sun. For a moment, the giant is half in shadow, half in gold, its vast form caught between earth and sky. When it turns to follow the valley downward, the mountain wind carries the sound of its steps long after it is gone. And there beyond the far ridge lies a different kind of giant one who lived where the land met the restless sea. The mountain winds fall away as you descend toward a land where the air grows heavy again, thick with salt, damp with the breath of waves. Ahead, the horizon is no longer a line of hills, but the restless shimmer of water stretching out to meet the sky. The scent of the sea reaches you before the sound, briny, mineral-rich, tinged with the faint sweetness of decaying kelp. You hear the waves next a deep and steady pulse against the rocky shore. Between their rhythm, another sound emerges, slower, heavier, as though the earth itself were drawing breath. Through the spray, a shape moves along the coast, dwarfing the jagged outcrops it passes. This is Prehistoric, one of the least known, yet most immense of all sauropods. Its remains tell us little, only a handful of colossal vertebrae. But those bones suggest a creature as long as the tallest lighthouse is high, with a weight that could press the shoreline into permanence. It moves parallel to the surf, the sea breeze combing the ridges along its neck. The light is strange here, silvered by cloud, fractured by spray, casting the giant in shifting tones of gray and pale gold. Every few steps it pauses to feed, drawing entire boughs of coastal conifers into its mouth with a slow, deliberate pull. Researchers still question whether Prehistoric truly lived by the coast, or if this one has wandered here in search of food or water. Some imagine that salt-rich plants could have been part of its diet, aiding in the balance of minerals its massive body required. Others suggest it may have used the open shoreline as a corridor where the flat land allowed easier passage than the dense inland forests. The wind carries the roar of distant thunder, and with it comes a shift in the light clouds, rolling low, heavy with rain. The surface of the water darkens whitecaps, lifting like pale claws before breaking in foam to collapse. Through it all, the Prehistoric continues its slow progress, untroubled by the storm's approach. You watch as the first drops fall large and cold, pattering against the giant's skin and the stone beneath your feet. The scent of wet salt rises sharply, mixing with the resin smell of torn branches. Waves crash higher now, spraying the lower part of its tail with mist, but it does not change its pace. There is a steadiness to it, a patience that feels as much a part of the coastline as the rocks and tide. Even as the rain thickens and the horizon blurs, it moves on each step, a quiet defiance of the storm's urgency. When the clouds finally close around it, you are left with only the sound of surf and the taste of salt on your lips. Somewhere beyond this coastline, far from the ocean's pool, another giant endures in the harsh meeting place between forest and desert. The sound of the sea fades behind you, replaced by the quiet rasp of wind moving over sand. The air is warmer here, the light sharper, the horizon stretched into an unbroken line, where land and sky meet in a haze. You are entering a place balanced on the edge between life and absence. A Cretaceous desert where water hides in rare springs and the trees grow low and far apart. Across this austere expanse moves Alamosaurus, a giant of the latest days of the dinosaurs. Its pale hide carries the colors of the land itself. Sun-bleached tans and muted browns, blurring its form against the rolling dunes and stony flats. It moves with the measured pace of something that has learned to conserve its strength in a land that offers little for free. A low stand of cycads clings to a rocky rise ahead, their fronds dull with dust. The giant lowers its neck, sweeping away grit with a toss of its head, before tearing the leaves free in broad, deliberate mouthfuls. Each movement is slow, as though timed to the rhythms of the desert itself. Researchers still question how Alamosaurus survived here at the close of the Cretaceous, when climate shifts and sea level changes were altering ecosystems across the continent. Some believe it followed seasonal paths from desert edge to river valleys, feeding on drought-tolerant plants during the dry months before returning to lusher ground. Others suggest it was a year-round resident, its immense lungs and efficient metabolism allowing it to endure the heat and scarce water. The wind sharpens, carrying grains of sand that tap softly against its flanks. From a distance, you can see its shadow stretch thin over the hard pan, a moving silhouette that fades and reforms with the rise and fall of the land. At a shallow basin, the giant pauses to drink from a pool no larger than a small pond. The water ripples outward in rings, disturbed by the steady rhythm of its breathing. Nearby, small mammals dart between stones, vanishing into crevices before the shadow of the neck passes over them. There is a quiet dignity to its presence here, a sense that survival itself is an act of strength. No herd surrounds it. No other giant shares this stretch of land. The desert belongs to it. When it finally turns to continue its journey, it moves toward the line where pale sand meets the faint green shimmer of a distant forest. That edge where dry earth gives way to shadowed growth is where your path will lead next into the cool bamboo-clad valleys of another southern giant. The heat of the desert lingers on your skin as you cross into a world of green silence. Here the air cools instantly, filtered through layers of bamboo leaves that whisper with every breath of wind. Light falls in broken patterns, scattered by the tall, hollow stems that rise like columns in a living cathedral. Somewhere in the half-light, you hear a slow, rhythmic creak like wood under strain, though no tree here is large enough to make it. You move toward the sound, your steps softened by a carpet of fallen leaves. The shadows shift, and an immense form emerges between the stalks. Ruyangosaurus, one of Asia's largest known dinosaurs, moves through the bamboo as though the forest bends for it. Its hide is patterned in muted greens and browns, the same dappled tones that modeled its ancestors' skin for millions of years. Each movement parts the bamboo with a sighing rustle, stems bowing and springing back in its wake. Researchers still question whether Ruyangosaurus preferred these dense valleys or merely passed through them while following rivers and seasonal feeding grounds. The fossil sites suggest a habitat that was once a mix of forest floodplain and open lowland, a patchwork that offered both cover and abundance. In this shadowed corridor, it feels like the giant has chosen the forest not for food, but for quiet. It lowers its head to feed, pulling an entire spray of bamboo into its mouth, chewing with the slow deliberation of something that knows it has all the time it needs. Small insect-like calls echo from deeper in the grove, answered by the faint flutter of prehistoric birds shifting in the branches overhead. The scent here is sharp and green, the fresh tang of cut bamboo mingled with the damp earth beneath. Every so often, the giant exhales, sending a warm gust that stirs the dust from the forest floor. You keep your distance, watching as it navigates the forest, without hesitation choosing paths that seem impossibly narrow, until its body slides through with the practiced ease of a lifetime here. The bamboo flexes and sways, never breaking unless the giant wills it. When it reaches the far side of the grove, the light opens, suddenly spilling over a hidden lake. The surface glitters in the afternoon sun, ringed with reeds and shadowed by trees whose roots drink directly from the water. The Ruyangosaurus steps into the shallows, the ripples spreading slowly outward in concentric circles. It drinks without hurry, the reflection of its long neck shimmering and breaking in the disturbed water. Above, a dragonfly hovers briefly before darting away into the deeper green. From here, the land will rise again, carrying you toward a hidden basin, where still waters and quiet cliffs shelter yet another great sauropod, one whose life unfolded far from the eyes of predators. The path from the bamboo forest narrows into a cleft between two ridges, where moss hangs in long, damp curtains from the overhanging rock. You follow the sound of water, not the tumbling rush of a stream, but the softer lap of waves against a still shore. When the gap widens, you step into a hidden basin, its edges framed by dark stone and the leaning shadows of ancient conifers. At the heart of this quiet place lies a lake so still it reflects the sky perfectly, save for the faint rings left by drifting insects. And there on the far bank stands Barosaurus. Its long neck arcs out over the water like the limb of a tree bending toward the sun, the small head dipping low to drink. Of all the giants you have seen, this one feels the most at ease, its movements unhurried, each step placed with the precision of something that does not waste energy. The skin along its flank catches the light in soft ripples as muscles shift beneath, and the air around it hums faintly with the quiet buzz of midges. Researchers still question whether Barosaurus lived primarily in open floodplains or frequented sheltered places like this. The fossil record offers clues a scarcity of predator remains near Barosaurus fossils, suggesting these giants may have chosen habitats where danger rarely followed. Some speculate that the long neck allowed it to feed both on high branches and the water plants at the edge of lakes without moving its body into deep water. You watch as it grazes along the shore, stripping soft foliage from low-hanging branches before returning to the shallows to drink again. Its reflection stretches and bends, with the ripples creating the illusion of a second giant moving beneath the surface. A small flock of pterosaurs wheels overhead, their shadows gliding silently across the water and over the giant's back. The Barosaurus pays no attention. It simply shifts its weight, the sound of water swirling around its legs, and moves farther down the shore. The air here is cool and heavy, with the scent of wet stone, mingled with the faint sweetness of decaying leaves. You breathe in deeply, feeling the quiet press against your ears, as if this place has been holding its breath for millions of years. When the Barosaurus finally lifts its head high, you see the droplets falling from its muzzle like brief, bright jewels before they vanish into the lake. It turns away from the water and disappears slowly into the shadows between the trees, leaving the basin empty, except for the returning stillness. Beyond this hidden refuge, the land will change again, flattening into a wide, warm delta where another colossal shape moves through the tide-fed grass. The forest thins, and the sound of trickling water grows into the steady breath of tidal channels winding through open land. You step out onto ground that is neither fully earth nor fully water mud flats, laced with reeds, dotted with pools that catch the sky in shifting fragments. The air here is warm and heavy, thick with the scent of salt, wet grass and the faint decay of plant matter carried in on the tide. Through the haze of late afternoon heat, a vast shadow moves. Slowly the shape sharpens into the towering form of Paralititan, the tidal giant of the Cretaceous. Its immense feet sink into the soft mud with each step, leaving deep impressions that immediately fill with brackish water. Behind it, a trail of swirling silt marks its passage like the wake of a passing vessel. It feeds along the water's edge, stripping thick fronds from palm-like plants that grow in clusters near the channels. Every so often it wades deeper, the water lapping against its chest, and pulls entire mats of aquatic vegetation free with a steady tug. Tiny prehistoric fish scatter in flashes of silver, vanishing into the reeds. Researchers still question whether Paralititan spent much of its life in coastal deltas or only visited seasonally. The fossil evidence, a partial skeleton found among tidal sediments, suggests that it was no stranger to brackish water, perhaps using these marshes as both feeding grounds and migration corridors. Some have speculated that the salt-rich plants here provided essential minerals for its massive frame. The delta is alive with smaller movement. Primitive turtles hauling themselves onto mud banks, insects dancing in clouds above the water, and shorebirds darting between the giant's feet to snatch the prey it disturbs. Despite its size, the Paralititan moves with remarkable calm, its bulk parting the reeds in slow, deliberate sways. You notice how the sunlight reflects off the water and casts a shimmering broken pattern up its flanks, as though it is painted in moving light. Each time it exhales, a soft mist drifts from its nostrils, briefly visible, before blending with the humid air. As the tide begins to turn, the water rises gently over the mudflats, and the giant starts to move inland. Its feet leave the shallows with a low sucking sound, each step carrying the scent of the delta farther from the water. Behind it, the tide washes away its footprints, erasing all trace that it was ever here, except in the memory of the reeds, bent and swaying in its wake. Beyond the delta's edge, the land hardens into sandstone cliffs, stained deep red by the sun, where yet another long-necked giant roams the ancient southwest. The wet air of the delta falls away behind you, as the land rises, drying into sandstone and scrub. Here the ground is warm underfoot, radiating heat gathered through long, unbroken hours of sunlight. Towering red cliffs frame the horizon, their faces streaked with mineral stains in ochre rust and pale cream records of ancient sediments laid down in a time before these giants walked. In the shadow of these cliffs, a figure moves, Sonorosaurus, the great sauropod of what will one day be the deserts of the American Southwest. Its long, tapering neck sweeps across the low vegetation, cropping tough desert plants adapted to survive in this arid land. Each step sends a faint puff of dust into the air, the particles catching sunlight like drifting gold. Unlike the marsh giants of the coasts, Sonorosaurus carries its bulk through a harsher world, where water is scattered in rare pockets and shade is a fleeting luxury. Researchers still question whether this dinosaur migrated between wetter valleys during the seasons or maintained a home range along the river corridors that cut through the cliffs. Fossil finds suggest it lived near what were once broad, slow-moving rivers, long since vanished into stone. The sound here is different. Less the chorus of insects and birds, more the steady hum of heat on rock, broken only by the occasional cry of a distant pterosaur circling in the bright sky. The Sonorosaurus moves without hurry, its hide patterned in sandy browns and muted reds that mirror the cliffs themselves, an adaptation that may have helped it blend into its environment. You watch as it approaches a dry wash, its massive legs stepping down carefully into the shallow channel before climbing the far bank with an easy, practiced strength. At the edge of a sparse grove of prehistoric conifers, it pauses to feed, stripping the branch tips in clean sweeps that send a rain of needles to the ground. The air carries the scent of resin, warm and sharp, mingling with the dusty breath of the cliffs. Above, a small cloud drifts lazily, casting a brief patch of shadow across the giant's back before sliding away, leaving it in full light once more. From this vantage, you can see how its presence shapes the land. Plants grow tallest, where the giant feeds less often, and trails wind through the scrub in gentle curves that follow the arc of its preferred roots. Even here, in a place that seems harsh to your eyes, the land is tuned to the rhythm of its steps. Beyond the cliffs, the land will cool again, shaded by deep forests, where a European giant moves in near silence among the trees. The heat of the red cliffs fades as the land shifts under your feet, stone giving way to damp, loamy soil. A light mist drapes itself between the trunks of towering conifers, and the air here feels cooler, touched with the scent of moss and running water. Bird calls echo faintly through the canopy, their tones muted, as though softened by the forest itself. From behind a curtain of ferns, a shape emerges. It is Turriosaurus, the great sauropod of ancient Europe. Its form quieter, more shadowed than the giants of the open plains. Its size is immense, nearly 30 meters long. But here in the forest, the giant seems almost shy, its bulk veiled by the shifting patterns of light and leaf. It moves with unhurried precision, placing each foot where the ground will bear it best. The forest floor is soft, with centuries of fallen needles muffling its steps to a deep, almost inaudible thud. Every few moments it pauses to feed, curling its neck to strip the upper branches of araucaria trees, then swinging down to graze on lush ferns that thrive in the understory. Researchers still question whether Turriosaurus lived much of its life in these shaded forests, or if it emerged into open ground seasonally. Fossils found in riverine sediments suggest it may have traveled between forested valleys and floodplains, following the rhythms of ancient waterways. Here, the trees stand close, forcing the giant to tilt and weave its neck through narrow gaps, a living needle threading through green. The air holds a quiet heaviness, the kind that comes from many layers of growth pressing close. You catch glimpses of its flank through the trees patterned in muted greens and grays, the modeling breaking its outline until it seems to dissolve into the forest around it. Only the slow sway of its tail, like a pendulum measuring time in vast, patient arcs, gives away its full shape. At a small clearing, It stops, lowering its head to drink from a pool fed by a trickling spring. The water ripples in wide circles, the surface briefly mirroring its long face before the image breaks apart. Tiny insects hover above the pool, darting away each time the giant exhales. When it lifts its head again, droplets fall from its chin to the moss below, where they vanish almost instantly. It stands there for a long moment, the forest holding its breath with it, before turning toward a deeper green, where the trees grow taller still. Beyond these shadowed valleys far from this quiet world, the polar forests await lands of long days and long nights, where smaller giants learn to survive in extremes. The forest grows thinner as you travel north, its canopy opening to let in a cold, slanted light. The air has a different weight here, crisper, tinged with the faint metallic scent of frost, even in the heart of summer. Your breath escapes in faint clouds, though the ground beneath your feet is soft with moss and low ferns. In the distance, movement stirs among the conifers. Not one giant, but several smaller than the southern titans, yet immense by any other measure. These are the polar wanderers, dinosaurs like Europasaurus and other hardy sauropods adapted to the long days and long nights of Cretaceous polar forests. Their bodies are compact, their necks shorter and more muscular than their equatorial cousins. A design perhaps better suited to navigating the dense, tangled growth here. They graze on the tough foliage that thrives in the short summer, storing energy for the leaner months ahead. Researchers still question how these giants endured the long winter darkness when the sun dipped below the horizon for weeks, leaving the land bathed only in dim twilight. Some believe they migrated north and south, with the seasons following the retreat and return of the light. Others argue they stayed year-round, slowing their metabolisms, feeding on evergreen conifers and the last stores of autumn's growth. The forest hums with the subdued life flocks of primitive birds, flitting between branches, the occasional rustle of small mammals in the underbrush. The light is soft, filtering through the trees at a low angle, turning the moss and lichen into a muted living carpet. You watch as one Europasaurus tilts its head back, pulling down a spray of needles, then swings its neck toward another, the gesture slow and deliberate. It is not just feeding, they seem to be moving together, coordinated as if bound by an unspoken understanding born of long seasons shared in close company. The scent here is sharp with resin and cool earth. Every step you take feels cushioned, the moss springing back into shape behind you. When the wind shifts, you can hear the faint groan of trees leaning under its pressure, the sound blending with the low, steady breathing of the herd. As the sun dips lower, the light turns pale gold, casting long shadows that reach far between the trunks. The giants begin to move toward a sheltered glade where the trees crowd close enough to break the wind. Here they will rest through the night, their bodies radiating heat into the still air, a living warmth against the encroaching cold. Beyond these polar forests lies the twilight of their age, an era of change, where the great sauropods will face the slow, inevitable decline of their long dominion. The air changes before the land does. It carries less warmth now, the breeze is sharper, tinged with the scent of dust, blown from distant drying plains. You can feel it in the ground as well, a subtle hollowness, as though the deep pulse of the earth is fading. The Cretaceous is drawing toward its close, and the reign of the sauropods, though still impressive, is no longer what it once was. The great herds are fewer, the vast floodplains quieter. New plants are rising, flowering species that change the food web, inviting new herbivores to flourish. Small, quick-footed dinosaurs move in ways the giants cannot match their agility, better suited to the shifting landscapes. In the distance, you see a lone Alamosaurus, perhaps one of the last of its kind in this region, moving slowly along a narrow river. Its steps are still steady, its frame still immense, but there is a solitary air about it, as though the herd paths have grown faint with time. Researchers still question the exact chain of events that led to this gradual retreat. Climate shifts, volcanic activity, changing vegetation, all may have played a part. Some suggest the rise of smaller, more specialized herbivores placed new pressures on the giants, while predators adapted to hunt the young more efficiently. The landscape itself reflects this transition. Forests give way to patchwork grasslands and scrub the once constant green corridors now broken into islands of vegetation. Rivers run narrower and seasonal droughts bite harder than before. Yet in their quiet persistence, the sauropods still leave their mark. Every fallen tree, every path pressed into the earth, every seed carried in their droppings keeps shaping the land, even in these last chapters. You follow the river's edge until the light begins to fade, the sky deepening into a muted amber. Somewhere beyond the horizon, changes are brewing that no creature here can sense, a chain of events set in motion far from Earth itself. The giants do not know they are living in their twilight. They move as they always have, breathing the air, walking the land, shaping the world with each passing day. And millions of years later, when their voices are gone and their shadows erased, their bones will speak for them, locked in stone, waiting for the patient hands of those who will find them. Beyond this moment lies a deeper quiet, where the work of the earth turns to memory and fossils begin their long vigil. The world has turned seasons and centuries passing until even the mountains have shifted their bones. The great herds are gone, their paths erased by time, their voices silenced in air that no longer remembers their weight. Only the earth remains their witness, and the earth remembers in stone. You walk through a landscape stripped of its green, a desert of pale rock and low wind-sculpted ridges. The sun lies heavy on the land, bleaching every shadow into sharp relief. Here and there, the ground breaks into splinters of fossilized wood, shards of a forest that has not stood for tens of millions of years. And then you see it, half buried in a slope of ochre sand, a shape both alien and familiar. A single vertebra, weathered but intact, the hollow chambers of its bones still visible, delicate as lace, and yet enduring enough to outlast empires. This is the patience of stone. The slow work of minerals replacing tissue molecule by molecule until the living becomes the eternal. Researchers still question the exact path a bone takes from death to fossil. Some believe burial in fine silt was the key sealing the remains from decay. Others argue that the mineral-rich waters flowing through floodplains carried the transformation forward, turning organic shapes into geologic truth. The ground here is littered with fragments, rib arcs, like bent ivory knuckled joints as big as a man's head, the thin, flat plates of pelvic bones. Together, they tell a story. If you know how to read it, a giant that fell near water, its body drawn down into the mud, buried under centuries of sediment until pressure and time remade it into something that could never decay. You run your fingers over the stone, feeling the faint ridges where muscles once anchored, the worn edges where scavengers may have fed before the burial. It is not just a bone, it is a memory solidified, a shape that once cast a shadow across the living earth. Above, the wind sighs over the ridge, scattering dust into the sky. You think of all the years that have passed since this vertebra last knew the warmth of sun or the sound of leaves in the wind. And you understand that fossils are not just remnants, they are time itself condensed into something you can hold. Somewhere in the distance, other bones lie waiting. Some will be found brushed clean by patient hands in a world that has almost forgotten what they once were. Others will remain hidden, their stories untold. Their patience measured not in centuries, but in the slow turning of continents. Beyond this ridge, night is falling and the stars will rise over the land. Stars the giants once lived, beneath unchanged, eternal in their own way. And under those same stars, we will stand once more in the shadow of their passing. Night comes quietly, without fanfare, settling over the land like a long-forgotten memory. The wind softens, the air cools, and the last traces of sunlight fade into the deep blues and silvers of evening. Above you, the first stars emerge faint at first, then gathering until the sky blooms with ancient light. You realize these are the same constellations in shape, if not in position, that shone over the backs of the giants. Brachiosaurus lifting its head into the golden dusk. Argentinosaurus crossing the southern floodplains. Mamenchisaurus threading its endless neck through the morning mist. Each one lived and moved under this same quiet canopy. The ground beneath you still carries their stories pressed deep into layers of rock and soil. Every fossil you have seen, every trackway and bone is a star in the Earth's own constellation of points of light that, when connected, tell the shape of a vanished age. Researchers still question how much of their lives we can ever truly know. The bones speak, but they speak in fragments and half-remembered lines from a book whose other pages have been lost to time. Yet even in those fragments, there's enough to stand here now and feel their presence, as if the space between stars were filled with their breath. The air is still. Somewhere far away, water moves through stone, tracing the same ancient paths the dinosaurs once walked. The scent of cool earth rises as the night deepens, mingled with the faint resin of unseen trees. You close your eyes and imagine the ground trembling again. Not with machines, but with the long, slow steps of a being so large that its shadow seemed to move before its body. You see the arc of a neck against the horizon, the swing of a tail cutting the dusk, the shimmer of heat over a sunlit plain. And when you open your eyes, the stars are brighter, sharper, as if they have been listening. Above, the Milky Way spills across the sky like a river of bone, and light flowing endlessly into the dark. It feels right to end here, in the same way it began beneath ancient skies, with the earth quiet and waiting, and the thought of the giants still walking somewhere just beyond the horizon. Their time has passed. And yet, in the patience of stone, in the patterns of the stars, in the stories we tell beneath their light, they endure.